The story of the Silk Road begins more than 2,000 years ago, long before modern highways, airplanes, or cargo ships connected the world. At a time when most civilizations knew little about lands beyond their borders, a network of ancient trade routes slowly emerged, stretching over 6,000 kilometers from the imperial cities of China to the distant markets of the Mediterranean. Despite its famous name, the Silk Road was never a single road. Instead, it was a vast web of desert trails, mountain passes, river valleys, and caravan routes that linked dozens of kingdoms and empires across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. The journey was incredibly dangerous. Traders faced scorching deserts, freezing mountain ranges, violent sandstorms, deadly bandits, and the constant risk of starvation. Yet they continued to travel because the rewards were extraordinary. Rare silk, precious gemstones, spices, gold, silver, and exotic goods were worth fortunes in distant lands. Over time, this remarkable network became far more than a commercial route. It became the first great bridge between East and West, allowing people, ideas, inventions, religions, languages, and cultures to move across continents, forever changing the course of human civilization. The origins of this incredible network can be traced to the Han Dynasty of China during the 2nd century BC. At the time, Emperor Wu faced a constant threat from powerful nomadic tribes known as the Xiongnu, who repeatedly attacked China's northern borders. Seeking allies against these enemies, the emperor sent a courageous diplomat named Zhang Qian on an ambitious mission into Central Asia. His journey was filled with hardship. He was captured, imprisoned for years, and forced to live among hostile tribes before finally escaping and continuing his expedition. Although he failed to secure the military alliance he had hoped for, Zhang Qian returned to China with something even more valuable. He brought detailed knowledge of distant kingdoms, rich markets, powerful horses, and thriving civilizations that most Chinese had never imagined. His reports revealed enormous opportunities for trade, inspiring the Han Dynasty to establish regular connections with the West. Historians often describe his expedition as the moment that opened the gates to what would later become known as the Silk Road. As trade expanded, Chinese silk quickly became the most desired luxury product in the ancient world. The secret of silk production was one of China's greatest treasures, guarded so carefully that revealing it to foreigners could be punishable by death. In Rome, silk was so rare and valuable that only emperors, wealthy nobles, and the richest merchants could afford garments made from it. Many Romans had no idea where this mysterious fabric came from. Some even believed silk grew on trees or was harvested from magical plants in distant eastern lands. But silk was only one part of the growing trade. Chinese merchants also exported porcelain, lacquerware, tea, paper, and fine artwork, while caravans returning to China carried Persian silver, Indian spices, Arabian incense, Roman glassware, precious stones, and magnificent horses from Central Asia. Every caravan crossing the deserts carried not only valuable goods, but also stories, technologies, beliefs, and discoveries that slowly connected civilizations, which had once lived in complete isolation. The journey across the Silk Road demanded extraordinary courage. Merchants organized themselves into large caravans consisting of hundreds of camels, horses, and guards to improve their chances of survival. One of the most feared obstacles was the Taklamakan Desert, whose name is often translated as the place from which no one returns. With almost no water, shifting sand dunes, and unbearable temperatures, even a small mistake could prove fatal. Beyond the desert stood the towering Pamir and Tian Shan Mountains, where freezing winds, avalanches, and narrow mountain passes threatened every traveler. Along these dangerous routes, oasis cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar, and Danhuang became thriving centers of trade, culture, and rest. Here, merchants from China, Persia, India, Arabia, and Rome exchanged goods, negotiated deals, learned foreign languages, and shared news from distant kingdoms. Without realizing it, these travelers were laying the foundations of the first, truly interconnected world, beginning a remarkable chapter in human history, whose influence would continue for centuries. As the Silk Road expanded across continents, it evolved into something far greater than a network of trade routes. It became the heartbeat of the ancient world, where civilizations that had never met before began, exchanging not only goods, but also knowledge, traditions, and beliefs. Every caravan that crossed the deserts and mountains carried stories from distant kingdoms, introducing people to foreign customs and unfamiliar ideas. The route connected the bustling cities of Chang'an in China with the magnificent markets of Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, Baghdad, Antioch, and eventually Constantinople. These cities flourished because they stood at the crossroads of global commerce, welcoming merchants from China, Persia, India, Arabia, Central Asia, and Europe. Their marketplaces echoed with dozens of languages, while the air was filled with the aromas of exotic spices, incense, and freshly brewed tea. For many travelers, these cities represented the first glimpse of cultures completely different from their own, making the Silk Road the earliest example of a truly global network. Trade along the Silk Road was astonishingly diverse. While silk remained the most famous commodity, countless other treasures traveled alongside it. From China came porcelain, paper, jade, lacquerware, tea, and delicate works of art. India supplied valuable spices such as black pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, and cloves, along with cotton textiles and precious gemstones. Persia became known for its luxurious carpets, silverware, and fine metal craftsmanship, while Arabia exported incense, perfumes, and rare horses. From the Roman world came elegant glassware, jewelry, wine, and gold coins that fascinated Eastern merchants. Yet the most valuable cargo often could not be seen or touched. New farming techniques, mathematical knowledge, astronomical discoveries, engineering skills, and medical practices traveled from one civilization to another, allowing societies to learn from each other's achievements. Some of history's greatest inventions, including paper and printing, eventually spread westward through these routes, transforming education and communication across continents. The Silk Road also became one of history's greatest highways for the spread of religion and philosophy. Buddhist monks traveled from India into China, carrying sacred scriptures and founding magnificent monasteries along the route. Their teachings gradually became one of China's major religions, influencing art, literature, and culture for centuries. Christianity also spread eastward through missionaries who established communities in Central Asia and China, while Islam expanded rapidly after the 7th century, bringing new centers of learning and trade under a common religious and cultural identity. Alongside these faiths traveled scholars, philosophers, artists, musicians, and storytellers who exchanged ideas wherever caravans stopped. The Silk Road transformed ordinary trading towns into vibrant cultural centers, where people of different backgrounds could meet, debate, and learn from one another. In many ways, it created one of the earliest forms of globalization, proving that the exchange of ideas could be just as powerful as the exchange of wealth. Despite its prosperity, life on the Silk Road remained filled with danger. Merchants often spent months or even years away from home, facing unpredictable weather, harsh deserts, towering mountains, disease, and ruthless bandits waiting to ambush wealthy caravans. To improve their chances of survival, travelers formed massive caravans with hundreds of camels, armed guards, guides, and translators who knew the local languages and customs. Caravanserai, large roadside inns built along the routes, became essential places where merchants could rest, repair equipment, feed their animals, and exchange news from distant lands. Every successful journey required careful planning, courage, and determination. Yet the promise of enormous profits continued to attract traders from every corner of the known world. As the centuries passed, the Silk Road reached unprecedented levels of prosperity. But an even greater transformation was approaching. A new empire was rising from the vast grasslands of Mongolia, one that would unite much of Asia under a single rule and usher the Silk Road into its greatest golden age. The 13th century marked a dramatic turning point in the history of the Silk Road. Across the vast grasslands of Mongolia, a warrior named Genghis Khan united rival tribes and forged the largest contiguous land empire the world had ever seen. Within a few decades, Mongol armies swept across Central Asia, China, Persia, and parts of Eastern Europe, conquering territories that had once been divided by endless wars. Although the Mongols were feared for their military campaigns, they also understood the importance of trade. Once the fighting ended, they established strict laws to protect merchants, punished banditry with severe penalties, and secured the major trade routes under a single authority. Historians often refer to this period as the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, when travelers could journey thousands of kilometers with a level of safety that had rarely existed before. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road entered its greatest golden age, connecting civilizations more closely than ever in history. With peace came prosperity. Caravans carrying silk, spices, gold, porcelain, horses, precious stones, and countless other goods crossed the continent in unprecedented numbers. Merchants from Venice, Persia, India, Arabia, and China met in thriving cities where fortunes were made every day. Among the most famous travelers was the young Venetian merchant Marco Polo, who journeyed across Asia with his father and uncle before reaching the magnificent court of Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan. Marco Polo spent many years in China, witnessing advanced cities, paper money canals, and technologies that were almost unimaginable to Europeans of his time. When he eventually returned home, his detailed accounts inspired generations of explorers and introduced Europe to the wonders of the East. Although some questioned the accuracy of his stories, his travels remain one of the most influential journeys in history, demonstrating how the Silk Road connected worlds that had once seemed impossibly distant. Yet the same routes that carried wealth and knowledge also carried an invisible enemy. In the mid-14th century, a deadly disease known as the Black Death began spreading across Asia and Europe. Fleas carried by Ruds traveled aboard merchant caravans and trading ships, allowing the plague to move rapidly along the Silk Road. Within only a few years, entire cities were devastated. Villages disappeared, economies collapsed, and millions of people lost their lives. Historians estimate that the Black Death may have killed between 1/3 and 1/2 of Europe's population, while causing enormous suffering across Asia and the Middle East as well. Trade slowed dramatically as fears spread from one region to another. The Silk Road, once celebrated as the greatest bridge between civilizations, had unintentionally become the pathway for one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, reminding the world that the movement of people and goods could bring both extraordinary progress and unimaginable tragedy. Despite the devastation caused by the plague, the Silk Road did not disappear overnight. Trade gradually recovered, but the world was beginning to change. Powerful new kingdoms emerged, maritime technology improved, and European nations started searching for faster sea routes to Asia that would avoid the long, dangerous overland journey. These developments would eventually transform global commerce forever. The ancient caravan routes that had dominated international trade for centuries were about to face their greatest challenge as ships prepared to sail across unknown oceans and new discoveries reshaped the map of the world. The legendary Silk Road slowly entered the final chapter of its extraordinary story, a chapter that would mark the end of an era while leaving a legacy that continues to influence the modern world. Now give me 4 images prompts for C. The decline of the Silk Road was not caused by a single event, but by a series of dramatic changes that reshaped the world. During the 15th century, The once powerful Mongol Empire had fragmented into smaller states, making the ancient trade routes less secure than they had been during their golden age. At the same time, new technologies in navigation and shipbuilding allowed European sailors to explore the oceans with greater confidence. In 1498, the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama successfully reached India by sailing around the southern tip of Africa, opening a direct sea route between Europe and Asia. Soon afterward, powerful maritime empires began transporting goods across the oceans more quickly, more cheaply, and in much larger quantities than caravans crossing deserts and mountains ever could. Gradually, the bustling caravan routes that had connected civilizations for centuries lost their importance, and many of the once great trading cities fell into decline, becoming silent reminders of a glorious past. Yet, while the caravans disappeared, the legacy of the Silk Road continued to shape the world in remarkable ways. The route had carried far more than silk, spices, and precious metals. It had spread paper from China to the Islamic world and Europe, laying the foundation for books, education, and the printing revolution. It had helped religions such as Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and many local beliefs reach new lands, influencing cultures that still exist today. Scientific discoveries, artistic styles, medical knowledge, and architectural ideas crossed continents through these ancient pathways, proving that civilizations become stronger when they exchange knowledge rather than isolate themselves. The Silk Road demonstrated that human progress has always depended on curiosity, cooperation, and the willingness to learn from distant cultures. Its greatest achievement was not the wealth it created, but the connections it built between people separated by thousands of kilometers. Even in the 21st century, the story of the Silk Road is far from over. Modern highways, railways, ports, and digital communication networks have revived the dream of linking Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East through international trade. One of the most ambitious examples is China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project inspired by the ancient Silk Road. New rail lines now transport goods across continents in days instead of months, while container ships carry millions of tons of cargo through global sea routes every year. Although today's world is powered by satellites, aircraft, and high-speed logistics rather than camel caravans, the fundamental idea remains the same: to connect civilizations through commerce, cooperation, and the exchange of ideas. In many ways, the ancient Silk Road has evolved rather than disappeared, continuing to influence how nations interact in the modern age. As we look back on more than 2,000 years of history, the Silk Road stands as one of humanity's greatest achievements. It was never merely a road built of stone or sand. It was a living network that connected emperors and merchants, scholars and pilgrims, explorers and ordinary travelers. Across deserts, mountains, and endless plains, it carried dreams, discoveries, inventions, and beliefs that transformed civilizations forever. It witnessed the rise and fall of mighty empires, the triumph of trade, the spread of great religions, and even the devastation of deadly pandemics. Few routes in history have shaped the world so profoundly. Although the camel caravans have vanished and many ancient cities now lie in ruins, the spirit of the Silk Road lives on wherever people exchange ideas, embrace new cultures, and build bridges instead of barriers. Its story is not simply the history of a trade route. It is the story of how humanity became connected, one journey at a time.